Welcome, friends. Today, we're taking another run at chicken marsala. A couple of weeks ago on our Saturday morning show, where we make what are the most watched recipe videos on YouTube, we made chicken marsala from the top recipe video, or the one that was watched the most. And quite frankly, the recipe, I'm not going to say it sucked, but it wasn't great. It was bland, had a very one-note type thing. It was one of those dishes where when we sat down for dinner, I felt like I was a little kid looking at my mom and dad saying, do I have to finish it? Because, it just wasn't, there was no punch. One note, very dull one-note dish. So the idea is that I went back to the drawing board and I went out and I looked at probably 50, 55 or 60 different recipes for chicken marsala. And what I realized was pre-1970, there was a lot of variation in this recipe. And then it just sort of became stagnant one or two different ways. But prior to that, there was a lot of different stuff in this dish. Now, in reality, it's called chicken marsala. So obviously chicken and marsala play a predominant role. But what I found with the recipe we did last week was they played the only role. And the dish needs more balance. You have to have a balance between salt and fat, acid, and it had no acid, and it had very little fat and very little salt. So here's what I'm doing different this time. I started out the same with the chicken cutlets, and I pounded them flat. I butterflied them and then pounded them flat. And instead of salt and peppering the flour, I salt and peppered the actual chicken first, so that there's some salt and pepper flavor on the chicken, not just sort of lost in the flour. And so I'm dredging the chicken pieces in the flour to coat them. Next up, I've got a cast iron frying pan here, brought up to temperature. It's going to get a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of butter. There was no butter in the last one. I'm putting the butter in for flavor, and the olive oil also is going to bring flavor. I'm putting both in for flavor. So we'll melt that down, get that going, and then we'll very quickly fry off these chicken cutlets. So I've got the chicken browned on both sides. You don't need to cook it all the way through. You just want to kind of get some brown and some flavor on the outside. We're going to cook it all the way through a couple steps from now. So we take that out and just set it aside. Into the pan, I'm going to put a little bit more butter. The butter is flavor. And I've got chopped mushrooms, and I'm going to stick those in. And we're just going to cook those down until they release their moisture. Now, the changes I'm making from last time, some of them show up very early in the development of this recipe, and one of them is shallots. So I've got a couple of minced shallots. A lot of the contemporary recipes use garlic. I'm going to put the garlic in because I think it really will bring something to the dish. And even though we're using a dry marsala, it's still really sweet. And in order to counteract that sweetness, I wanted to put an acid in. And I was torn. I've seen a lot of recipes that used lemon juice, and I think lemon would bring a really nice, bright acidity as well as some citrus flavor. And the other was to use a vinegar. And I've gone back and forth over the last little while about the vinegar. Should I use white wine vinegar? Because the grapes, even though this is a really dark wine, the grapes used are white grapes. And so white wine, I think, would bring a bright acidity without adding any other flavors. And the other choice would be to use balsamic vinegar. But I kind of thought the flavor profile between the balsamic and the marsala would be too close, since they're both aged for a very long time in wood. And so I thought they They both share sort of that sweet flavor profile that I kind of wanted to avoid this time. So I've got the shallots and the garlic in. I'm just going to cook the garlic a little bit longer. The mushrooms have gone down to almost nothing at this point. There. So now we put in the marsala. And I'll just bring that up to a simmer just to cook off that alcohol flavor. Now, one of the other things I found last time was that by the time you sort of reduce the marsala down, there's not much sauce left. And I wanted to have a little bit more sauce to coat the chicken. And you can counteract that by putting in more marsala, but that just sort of amped up that marsala flavor, that overly sort of cloying sweet flavor, which I didn't want to do. So when I deboned and took the skin off of these chicken breasts, I put them in this pot with an onion and a little bit of water, and it's been simmering here for about a half an hour. And that is just to get some chicken stock to pour in here. Now, of course, you don't have to do that. If this seems like a step too far to you, don't bother. Just use chicken stock that you buy at the supermarket. So I'm just going to let this simmer down and reduce a little bit before I move on to the next step. Okay, looking good. I always tell people at every stage, give it a taste. Yeah, a lot more balance there already than what we had last time. I'm going to put just a little bit of pepper and maybe a little sprinkle of salt. And to finish the sauce, I'm going to put in a little bit more butter and a few glugs of the vinegar. Mix that in. Give it another taste. I've got a whole jug of these tasting spoons back there. Yeah. So the vinegar has rounded out the flavor, cut some of the sweetness from the wine, and that last pat of butter has added a nice round mouth feel. Coats your mouth really nicely. So the chicken goes back into the pan, and we just cook it through the rest of the way.
So Glenn, you have been busy adapting the other recipe.
I believe this is an improved chicken marsala. The purists may say it's not chicken marsala because I've added too many things.
But you have adapted a basic chicken marsala recipe to suit your
To suit me.
flavor.
Hopefully it suits you too.
Yeah, that would work best.
But you know, and I think that's an important part of cooking is there's a need for sometimes the dogma,
Yes.
but the reality is if you don't like it, then why? Just change it and make it something that you want to eat.
All right, so I see you've got some onions in this one.
Yeah, so shallots.
Oh, sorry, shallots.
Yeah, shallots. Not lots of shallots, just some shallots.
Would you like to use that
Shallots. Because I know that someone's going to tell me that I said it wrong.
Yeah. Tomato, shallots.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So it's got a kind of it's got a fuller flavor. Like I can still taste the marsala.
Yep.
It's right there, but it seems like it's got a creamy texture to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming you added, I don't know, maybe some cream or some butter.
Butter.
Okay.
Cream. Definitely, you could add some cream.
Because it's got that globular, not globular, but that large molecule.
It changes the mouthfeel and it makes it more pleasant to eat.
And a little bit of garlic in there, I taste.
A little bit of garlic, and some vinegar just to that acid to cut.
that would cut
to
the,
cut
the
yeah.
the fat. Yes. Is
Well,
that
the
what vinegar does?
fat and the sweet from the
Of
marsala.
The marsala.
So,
Yeah, it's quite nice.
So I think for us this is a better version, and you know what? You need to play with it. You make it once.
Maybe you don't like garlic.
Leave the garlic out. Maybe you don't want to buy shallots because you don't want to buy shallots and you've got onions.
Maybe you think some steamed asparagus kind of tossed on top
Yeah.
at the end would be really good. Because I actually think it would be really good.
I had been looking for dried porcini mushrooms because I thought dried porcini mushrooms in with all of this would add an extra layer of flavor. I think this is one of those recipes that as long as you've got chicken and you've got marsala wine,
You're good to go.
you can call it chicken marsala.
We give you permission.
Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.